What happens when you encounter something you don't expect? For a long time, psychologists thought that people learned fear. Now it's a funny thing, because if you take a lab rat out of his home cage and you put him in a new cage where you want to teach him, say, to be afraid of something, to be afraid of a light paired with a shock, which is a typical psychological experiment. The funny thing about the rat is you got to let him calm down before he's normal. Well, except that you might think that the not calm rat is also the normal rat, right? You take the rat out of his cage and you put him in the new cage, and what does he do? He goes like this. Why? Well, he's a rat, right? Someone might eat him. So he's a bit nervous about being in this new situation. Rats do not like being in a new situation. They don't like bright light. If you put them in a new situation that's brightly lit, they go right over to the corner because they think maybe cats won't find them. Rats are so afraid of cats that they never even have to meet a cat to be afraid of them. So you can take a rat that's never seen a cat in his life, and if you let him smell some cat odor or show him a cat, if you show a rat a cat somewhere he doesn't expect it, he will run back to his burrow and scream for 24 hours. Now you imagine how scared you'd have to be to scream for 24 hours, especially given a rat only lives about a year. So the rat runs back to his burrow and he screams, and every other rat who hears him scream freezes, and they all stay like that for 24 hours till they sort of calm down. And then the first thing they do is they go back to the place where they saw the cat and they start to map it out. So they do these things called corner runs, which is, so the rat wants to go back to this territory. He knows the territory might be a place where he gets food. Is the cat still there? Well, you might think, stay in the burrow, right? But then maybe you don't get something to eat. So the rat goes back to the place where the cat was, carefully, and if nothing kills him, the rat's smart enough to go back to the scene of the crime, so to speak, right? It's not going to let the dragon that might be there grow. The rat knows that if something is terrifying, it should be investigated, not run away from. The question is, what do you encounter when you encounter something you don't expect? If you encounter something unexpected, the first thing you see is not the world. The first thing you see is just a sense of discomfort and fear, combined with some latent curiosity that the world is not the way you thought it was. Now, how do you find out what the world is actually like? We have to investigate it. You have to investigate it. It means you have to take a risk. You have to move forward the same way that people do in psychotherapy. You have to find the thing that you're bordering on avoiding and go in and map it. Now, it's a curious thing, you know. Common anxiety disorder is agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is a generalized anxiety disorder, and people who suffer severely from agoraphobia often get to the point where, because of their panics, they're housebound. They can't go outside their room. An agoraphobic comes in for therapy. You think, well, what do you do with them? And you say, well, the agoraphobic says, I can't go on elevators. And you say, okay, well, let's go try. You say, okay, well, there's the elevator. You say, how close can you get to the elevator? You say, well, I can't really get more than like 20 feet, that's maximum. I said, well, okay, let's just go up to 20 feet there and stand there and stand there and stand there and stand there. Sooner or later, they get bored of being 20 feet from the elevator. And then you say, well, look, could you go 10 feet? No, I couldn't go 10 feet. That's too close. How about, could you go 3 more feet? Yeah, I think I could do that. So they go 3 more feet, and then you let them stand there. They're like confronting the elevator. And then they're inside the elevator, but they're going like this, because they don't want to look at the elevator, right? So you say, well, you got to look at the elevator, you got to look at the numbers, you got to look at the buttons. So they do that. And then you think, well, could we go up a floor? No, we couldn't go up a floor. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. We'll just close the door, I'll put my hand in, it'll open again. Could you do that? Yeah, I could do that. Step by step. Sooner or later, and usually sooner, bang, they've gone up a floor, right? So then what happens? They go home and have a fight with their husband that's been brewing for like 15 years. Why? Well, it's not because the elevator is symbolically related to the fight. It has nothing to do with it. It's because what the person learns in the combat with the unknown is that they can confront things that frighten them without being destroyed by the confrontation. And so what you see immediately, and this was contrary to an original psychoanalytic prediction, is that, man, you take that person out and you teach them they can go on the elevator, and right off the bat they're going to shopping malls, they're in taxis, they're back in the subway, and they're standing up for themselves at home. Generalization. Why? Because they didn't learn that the elevator wasn't frightening. That isn't what they learned. They learned that despite the fact that the elevator was as terrifying as anything they've ever encountered, they were actually up to the challenge.